Can't wait for this. Eric Mangini, 3 years, Jets head coach, couple of years in Cleveland, Fox Sports NFL analyst. He knows all about the Jets, and he is now joining me live on a Friday. Love talking ball with a coach. Listen, we know the Jets are a mess. They were on display. They don't have a Pro Bowler. The Ravens had 12 last year. There's a talent issue too. What do you make of Darnold? Talk about Trevor Lawrence. You take him. What do you make of the whole scene with Darnold and the club?
Well, this whole situation is there's problems on a lot of different levels. You figure they started 1-7 last year, so historically with Adam they've started slow. They put a huge investment into the offensive line. They picked up 2 guards and a center and a tackle in free agency. They drafted a tackle, but yet they're almost last in the league in sacks allowed and don't run the ball very effectively. Almost close to last in that as well. And then there's the discipline issue in New York. When you're almost double plus in personal fouls, that's a problem too. So it's hard to really assess where Darnold is. But here's what I'll say. Quarterbacks are a little bit like GMs. GMs get to fire one head coach. They usually don't get to fire a second head coach. And quarterbacks are often like that as well. You know, they may outlive one head coach and get to the second head coach, but usually after that, you know, they're on their way out too. And you just haven't seen the type of development from Sam that you'd hope to. And my concern with him coming out of college is he was a 50-50 guy. He was almost the same amount of interceptions as touchdowns. And that's always a concern of mine in terms of overall decision making.
Well, the opposite of that is Patrick Mahomes. I'm hearing things now. He's going to change the league. There'll never be anybody as good as Patrick Mahomes. What do you make of that?
Look, I saw that quote too, and it was, he's going to change the league, but he's like Dan Marino. He's going to change the league, but he's like all these historic quarterbacks. And it felt a little bit like I had to get into my DeLorean. You know what I mean? It's Back to the Future. And every single time someone's going to change the league. You know, Lamar Jackson's going to change the league. Deshaun Watson's going to change. Everybody's changing the league. Everybody's a once-in-a-generational talent. I really like what Patrick Mahomes has done. And is he changing the league? I don't know. He came in some pretty great real estate. You know, he had Alex Smith there to mentor him. He's got one of the best offensive head coaches that you could ask for in Andy. He's got some outstanding playmakers, arguably some of the best in the league. That's pretty great real estate to come in as a young guy. And I'm not trying to take anything away from what he's accomplished, but a context is always good as well.
I think New England is sort of built with Cam Newton power running to make things uncomfortable for Kansas City this weekend. What say you?
I absolutely believe that. Here's what I like about this game for New England. Is with Cam, they can create all the problems that Baltimore creates for people, and they've shown a willingness to do that in week 1, but then they can throw the ball. They can get over the problems that Lamar Jackson has, where Cam was very efficient as a passer against Seattle. So they can create both of those problems for Kansas City, and it's not just good for Kansas City. It's good as they move forward. I was surprised by how well Cam has thrown the ball, especially coming off an injury. And I was equally surprised by how much New England was willing to run him in week 1 and use the quarterback-driven runs. When you combine those two things, it's a ridiculous problem for defenses.
You know, it's interesting. Dak, this is kind of interesting. Dak said, and Dak's not a guy that's going to stray away from what the owner and the coach says. Dak says, we want to get into track meets. We want to pass the football. So that tells me Mike McCarthy wants to pass the football too. And I just don't know if that defense should be on the field that much. What do you make of this idea that they want to play up tempo and fast all the time?
I think it's a bad idea. I went back and looked at it, and I went back to their 2016 season where they're 13-3. They're number 3 in the NFL in time of possession. Okay. And that's huge. And we talked about that a lot during that season. Now this year, they're 29th in time of possession.
Wow.
They average 107 yards per game rushing. And as much as we talk about their offensive line has changed significantly, and it's been a mixed bag. But you've got to help the offensive line by running the ball consistently. And when you have a defense that's struggling, You've got to play complementary football. You get into those track meets, and that day you're having an off day, it's a real problem for your defense. And when you start looking at this from only one lens, only the offensive lens, you're going to be exactly where Dallas is. Okay, they're 1-2, and they really should be 0-3. And it's not a formula that I think is sustainable for them.
By the way, yeah, Baker Mayfield, who I've always thought was a reach at number 1, goes up against him this week. And I said, I think Baker's now, for the first time in his life, being coached perfectly, which is 23 throws a game, power run it, be complimentary. I think this Cleveland is really a good football team potentially. Your thoughts?
This Cleveland has a chance to be a really good football team. 2 outstanding running backs, a pretty good offensive line, a really good offensive line coach in Bill Callahan. They have a chance, if they'll commit to the run, of not only winning a bunch of games, but surprising a lot of people as well. It plays into what Baker does well, where he can build off the play action. It simplifies the coverages. It gives you a lot of 8-man boxes. So then you've got the receivers isolated outside. And my biggest fear for them is that the stars start complaining about not getting the ball enough, and they give into that. That is the wrong approach for them. Stay the course of what they're doing right now. Don't worry about the noise from the players who want the ball more. That program hasn't worked for them when they've conceded to the stars. This is a really good program that they have right now.
The shock of the league may be Josh Allen, Buffalo quarterback, his emergence. You know their offensive coordinator, Brian Daboll, really, really well. You've had him multiple times. Are you surprised by the emergence, or did you think it would always work?
Not surprised at all. Brian was my offensive coordinator in Cleveland, my quarterback coach in New York. He actually worked on the defensive side with me when he first came into the league. He was my assistant in the secondary. You can't kill Daboll with work. He is one of the hardest working guys I have ever seen, and I'll put him head to head against anybody. And then he's really bright, and he's got a different perspective, which helps a young quarterback because he's not just teaching these guys about what they're doing offensively. He's helping them understand what they're seeing defensively, and not from a lens of I've only coached on one side of the ball, so I have a good idea. He's actually coached the other side of the ball and the secondary, so he understands how it works. And that, to me, is a huge, huge asset, especially for a young, emerging quarterback, to understand what they're looking back at and the why behind it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Brian Daboll, I was just saying this earlier. If I was the Jets and could get like an Urban Meyer, a Lincoln Riley, or a Brian Daboll, I would be more prone to keep Darnold because I think they would elevate him. But if the Jets couldn't get like what I consider an A coach, then you go for Trevor Lawrence. Well, I mean, what would you do tomorrow if you were offered 3 firsts, 3 seconds, and to give up the Trevor Lawrence pick, like the number 1 Jet pick, and you could keep Darnold? You get 3 additional 1s, 3 additional 2s to go along with the 2 1s you have this draft and the 2 1s following. What would you do as a GM?
I mean, that's a lot of draft picks. That's a lot of years of service. You figure you had 5 years of service from all those first round draft picks. Yeah, it's a really hard question, Colin, because you never, ever, ever want to pass on a franchise quarterback. So if you have that conviction that he is your guy, he's your Peyton Manning, your Drew Brees, your Tom, if he's that guy to you, then you don't give it up no matter what's offered.
Yeah.
And if there's uncertainty, then you definitely take the picks and build the strongest team.
Good stuff, Coach. Good seeing you. Eric Mangini on a Friday. Thanks, man. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.